Can you name the importance of at least one of the nations in the ASEAN, and what type of agreement we have with at least one of those nations? And how many nations are in ASEAN, by the way?
I couldn't tell you the exact amount of nations in that, but I know we have allies in South Korea and Japan and in AUKUS with Australia, trying to work on submarines with them.
Mr. Hegseth, none of those countries are in ASEAN.
Across.
None of those 3 countries that you've mentioned are in ASEAN. I suggest you do a little homework before you prepare for these types of negotiations. Listen, Mr. Hegseth, we ask our troops to go into harm's way all the time. We ask them to go into harm's way. And this behind me is a copy of the Soldier's Creed, a copy that usually hangs over my desk here in the Senate, and you should be familiar with it. It's the same copy that hung over my desk at Walter Reed every single day that I woke up and fought my way back because I wanted to go back and serve next to my buddies who'd saved my life. This same copy, these words are repeated over and over and over again. And let me read out 2 things to you, 2 sentences. I will always place the mission first, and I am disciplined, physically and mentally tough, trained and proficient in my warrior task. Mr. Hegseth, our troops follow these words every single day, and they man up and they pack their rucksacks and they go to war. And they deserve a leader who can lead them, not a leader who wants to lower the standards for himself of raising.
It starts with a basic question, not a trick, not a trap. How many nations are in ASEAN? Simple, foundational, essential, and then hesitation. Not knowing is one thing. Guessing is another. Naming the wrong countries? That's different, because this isn't a classroom. This isn't a quiz. This is a confirmation hearing for the person who wants to run the most powerful military on earth. And sitting across the table is someone who already knows the answer. And more importantly, knows what that answer reveals. Because this moment is not about ASEAN. It's about readiness. It's about competence. And by the time it's over, the real question isn't what he got wrong. It's how much else he doesn't know.
Mr. Hegseth, this hearing is about whether you are qualified to be Secretary of Defense, and one of the qualifications, to answer my colleague's question, is to actually win the votes of every member of this committee and to be confirmed by the United States Senate. And you need to convince us that you're worthy of that vote, because the people of the state of Illinois voted for me to be their senator so that I could cast that vote when it comes to picking who is going to be the next Secretary of Defense. This hearing now seems to be a hearing about whether or not women are qualified to serve in combat, and not about whether or not you are qualified to be Secretary of Defense. And let me just say that the American people need a SecDef who's ready to lead on day one. You are not that person. Our adversaries watch closely during times of transition, and any sense that the Department of Defense that keeps us safe is being steered by someone who's wholly unprepared for the job puts America at risk, and I am not willing to do that. With that in mind, Mr. Hegseth, I want you to try to explain to the American people, this committee, who have to vote for you, and to our troops who are deployed around the world, why you are qualified to lead the Department of Defense. We already know that you've only led the largest, a 200-person organization. We already know that you so badly mangled a budget that after you left, they had to bring in a forensic accountant to figure out what went wrong. And that the largest budget you ever managed was about $18 billion. You know, that is about 51,560 times lower than the Department of Defense budget of $825 billion. $16 million is 51,568 times smaller than the defense budget. Please describe to me, Mr. Hegseth, you talk about DOD passing an audit. Please describe to me a time or an organization when that you led underwent an audit, because you say you're going to hire smarter people than you to run this audit. I'm not asking you to be an accountant. I want you to be able to tell me what kind of guidance will be given to those employees, what will happen whether or not you pass that audit. Have you led an audit of any organization, yes or no? I don't want a long answer, yes or no. Have you led an audit of any organization of which you were in charge?
Senator, in both of the organizations I ran, we were always completely fiscally responsible.
Yes or no, did you lead an audit?
And the way
yes or no, did you lead an audit?
Stated,
yes or no? What are you afraid of? You can't answer this question. Yes or no, did you lead an audit? Do you not know this answer?
Senator, every
Yes or
part
no?
of my leadership
Yes
of these
or no?
organizations
Yes
has
or
been
no? Did you lead an audit?
misrepresented
I will
from
take
top
that as
to
a no.
bottom.
What were the findings? So there were no findings because you've never led an audit. What guidance did you give the auditors? None, because you've never led an audit. Nobody expects you to be an accountant, Mr. Hegseth. What we expect is for you to understand the complexity of this Pentagon budget process that is absolutely necessary to outfit our warfighters. Look, the Secretary of Defense is required to make quick decisions every single day with high-level information that's being provided for them. A Secretary of Defense has to have breadth and depth of knowledge. Right now, I am concerned that you have neither. Mr. Hegseth, what is the highest level of international negotiations that you have engaged in, that you have led in? Because the Secretary of Defense does lead international security negotiations. There are three main ones that the Secretary of Defense leads and signs. Can you name at least one of them?
Could you repeat the question, Senator?
Sure. What is the highest level of international security agreement that you have led? And can you name some that the Secretary of Defense would lead? There's three main ones. Do you know?
I have not been involved in international security arrangements because I have not been in government other than serving in the military. So my job has been to
no. The
lead
answer is no.
men and
Can you
women in
name one of the
combat.
three main ones that the
You're
Secretary
talking
of
about
Defense
defense
signs?
arrangements. I mean, NATO might be one that you're referring to.
Status of Forces Agreement would be one of them.
Status of Forces Agreement. I've been a part of teaching about Status of Forces Agreements.
But you don't
inside
remember to
Afghanistan.
mention it? You're not qualified, Mr. Hegseth. You're not qualified. You talk about repairing our defense industrial complex. You're not qualified to that. You could do acquisition and cross-servicing agreements, which essentially are security agreements. You can't even mention that.
Watch the structure, because nothing here is random. It feels spontaneous. It feels heated, but it's controlled, deliberate, step by step. First, control of the frame. Before any real questioning begins, Tammy Duckworth resets the entire room. She says it directly. This hearing is not about distractions, not about side debates. It is about one thing, qualification. That matters more than anything else, because once the frame is set, every answer is judged against it, and every failure becomes clearer. Second, build the case before asking the question. She doesn't jump in aggressively. She lays out facts. A 200-person organization, budget mismanagement, a forensic accountant brought in after. Then the number, 16 million. And then another number, 825 billion. That's the Department of Defense. Let that gap sink in. Not slightly bigger, not moderately larger, 51,000 times larger. That's not a step up. That's a different universe. And she doesn't need to say it. The math says it for her. Third, the audit question. Simple, direct. Have you ever led an audit? Yes or no? No wiggle room, no interpretation, just clarity. And this is where everything begins to crack. Pete Hegseth doesn't answer. He circles. He reframes. He talks about responsibility, but he avoids the core. So she asks again, same question, yes or no? Again, no answer. Now comes the moment. Calm, controlled. I will take that as a no. That line lands hard because it ends the debate. It removes ambiguity. It tells everyone watching, he didn't answer, and the answer is no. No shouting, no theatrics, just conclusion. And from that point forward, the tone changes. Fourth, escalation. Now she moves to something bigger, international security agreements. This is not theory. This is the job. The Secretary of Defense negotiates with allies, signs agreements, and shapes global security. So she asks, name one, just one. Not all, just one. He hesitates and asks her to repeat. That hesitation matters because in real negotiations, there are no second chances to hear the question. Then a guess. NATO, Tatain. A broad alliance, relevant but not precise. Not what she asked. And she doesn't correct immediately. She waits. Silence again. Pressure builds. Eventually, he reaches for something closer. Status of Forces Agreement. But it comes late, after hesitation, after uncertainty. And timing matters, because knowing something late is not the same as knowing it when it counts. Fifth, return to ASEAN. Now the earlier clip makes sense. This wasn't random. It was a setup, a test of basic regional understanding. And he failed it. Not partially, completely. South Korea, not ASEAN. Japan, not ASEAN. Australia, not ASEAN. 3 answers, 3 misses. And when she says none of those countries are in ASEAN, that's not just correction. That's exposure. Because this isn't advanced strategy. This is baseline knowledge, the kind expected before day 1 dive. 6th, shift from knowledge to stakes. Now the tone changes again. Facts are done. Now comes meaning. She brings in the soldier's creed, not as decoration, but as proof. Because Tammy Duckworth isn't just a senator. She's a combat veteran. She lost both legs in Iraq. She lived this. So when she reads, I will always place the mission first. Those aren't just words. That's lived experience. And now she draws the line. Our troops meet the standard every day in combat, under pressure, with lives on the line. So why should the standard be lowered for leadership? That's the question she's really asking. Not directly, but clearly. 7th, the final verdict. You are not qualified. No build-up, no hesitation, no ambiguity, just a conclusion. And here's why it lands so hard. Because she didn't start there. She built to it step by step, question by question, failure by failure. So by the time she says it, it doesn't feel like an opinion. It feels like the only possible outcome. And that's the strategy. Not to argue, not to debate, but to demonstrate. 8th, the deeper layer. Because this isn't just about one hearing. It's about perception. Supporters will say this was political, a setup, an attack. Critics will say this was necessary, a test, a reality check. And both sides will walk away unmoved. But that's not the point of hearings like this. The real audience is everyone watching later. Clips, highlights, moments like ASEAN, moments like I will take that as a no. Those become the story. Not the full transcript, not the full context, just the defining moments. And those moments shape perception. 9th, the bigger question. What does it actually take to lead the Department of Defense? Is it vision, experience, instinct, or is it something simpler, preparation, knowing the basics, understanding the landscape, being ready before you walk in? Because once you're in, there are no retries, no do-overs, no second chances to answer correctly. And that's what this hearing exposed. Not just what was said, but what wasn't known. And that's the part that lingers. Because in the end, this isn't just about one nominee. It's about the standard. Who sets it? Who meets it? And what happens when someone doesn't? That's when the system is supposed to respond. Not emotionally, not politically, but procedurally. Because confirmation hearings are not ceremonies. They are filters designed to catch exactly this moment. A gap, a hesitation, a failure under pressure. And then they ask, is this acceptable? Is this manageable? Or is this disqualifying? Because once that person is confirmed, the questions don't get easier. They get harder, faster, higher stakes, with less room for error. No one pauses a battlefield decision to repeat the question. No one slows down a negotiation because the answer isn't ready. And no one explains the basics when the expectation is that you already know them. That's the risk, not the moment itself, but what the moment represents. Because if you struggle here, in a controlled room, with time, with preparation, what happens out there when intelligence is incomplete? When allies are waiting? When adversaries are watching? That's the real test. And that's what hearings try to simulate. A glimpse, a preview, a controlled version of uncontrolled reality. Now zoom out, because this isn't just about one exchange. It's about standards over time. What used to be required versus what is now acceptable. Experience used to be non-negotiable. Preparation used to be assumed. Now it's debated, redefined, sometimes ignored. And every time the line moves, it rarely moves back. That's how institutions change. Not in one decision, but in a series of small allowances. One exception, then another, until the exception becomes the expectation. and the expectation becomes the new normal. That's the quiet shift happening underneath moments like this. Not loud, not obvious, but real. Because when a nominee struggles with foundational knowledge, the question isn't just about that nominee. It's about the process that brought them there. Who vetted them? Who approved them? Who decided this was enough? And more importantly, who is willing to say it isn't? That's the pressure on the committee. Not just to ask questions, but to draw a line clearly, publicly, on the record. Because once that vote is cast, it doesn't disappear. It follows through decisions, through outcomes, through consequences. And if something goes wrong later, people don't just ask what happened. They ask who allowed it. That's why moments like this matter more than they seem. They're not just exchanges. They're signals. Signals about readiness, signals about standards, signals about accountability. And signals travel. They reach allies. They reach adversaries. They shape perception far beyond that room. Because leadership at that level is not just about what you do. It's about what others believe you can do. Confidence matters. Credibility matters. And once doubt enters the equation, it doesn't leave easily. So when someone doesn't meet the standard, the system faces a choice: adjust the standard or uphold it. And that choice defines everything that comes next. Because once that decision is made, it doesn't stay contained. It spreads across agencies, across appointments, across expectations. Standards at the top don't just sit there. They cascade downward. If the bar is lowered once, others notice. Future nominees notice. Advisors notice. Even the people doing the vetting notice. And slowly, the question shifts from, "Are you ready?" to, "Will this be enough?" That's the long-term consequence. Not one hearing, not one vote, but the signal it sends. Because institutions don't weaken overnight. They erode quietly, incrementally, decision by decision. And every time the system chooses convenience over competence, it writes a precedent, a new baseline, one that becomes harder to reverse the next time. So this moment, this exchange, it's not just a snapshot. It's a marker, a point in time where the line was tested. And now everyone is watching to see where that line is finally drawn.